Hi there, I'm Tim Autrey, and welcome to Principle-Based Performance Improvement, where we combine timeless wisdom with modern science and practical tools to help you move yourself and your organization toward better, safer, and more productive outcomes.
Now that we have identified that things are the way they are because they got that way, let's talk about precept number 2. And I'll tell you, this is oftentimes one of the favorite precepts when we're doing these, like in the human performance basic training level, when we're talking with a lot of the folks that are out there dealing with this stuff. Precept number 2 is this: 84 to 94% of all mistakes on the job are set up by process, programmatic, or organizational issues. And we figure the real number is somewhere in between. So the point is, the lion's share of time, the majority of time that human error occurs on the job, something or things have set that person up to make the mistake. So then you also might ask, well, what about the other 6 to 16%? Human fallibility. Remember the whole 2 to 5 mistakes per hour? Human beings screw up. We make mistakes. Why is it important to recognize this? Because this is something we can actually go after. We can specifically go after those things that are setting people up to make mistakes. What are those setups? Well, once again, to have simplicity on the far side of complexity, rather than talking about things like latent organizational weaknesses and error-likely situations, which the scientists talk about, we like to refer to these things that set people up to make mistakes as traps, roadblocks, and landmines. So let's talk about each one. First of all, a trap or traps are work environment conditions that make it more likely for people to make mistakes. Conditions of the work environment. And there are 11 predominant ones, and I'm just going to put them up here. You can read them probably in your handout a little bit better. Time pressure, distraction, interruption, multiple tasks, overconfidence, peer pressure, first shift, last shift, change or off normal, physical environment, vague or interpretive guidance, mental stress, and fatigue. These are the top 11 traps. Remember, these are conditions of the work environment that make it more likely for people to make mistakes. All right, let's move on. So the next thing that sets people up to make mistakes are what we call roadblocks. Roadblocks are barriers, obstacles, or conditions that make it harder or take longer to complete work. Now, one of the things I want to point out here, if you've ever been through any other human performance training, a lot of folks use the word barriers and defenses to mean the same thing. We don't. Defenses are good things. They keep us out of harm's way. They keep us from getting hurt and killed. They keep bad things from happening. Barriers are things that get in our way unnecessarily when we're trying to get our work done. So that's an important distinction there. So this is basically, think about this. Let's say you are tasked with getting a job done. Now let me ask you this question. What is our performance at work predominantly based upon? Our performance at work is predominantly based upon getting our work done. And in most work environments, the quicker we can get it done, as long as it was done reliably and effectively, the more we get patted on the back. So we have a job to do, and let's say, for example, our job is to walk from here over to here. Now, I can't do much of a demonstration because of the limits of the studio here, but let's say my job was to do that, and right in the middle of that is a big barrier. My performance is based upon the number of times I can get from there to here over the course of my 8-hour workday. That'd be a really boring job, wouldn't it? But let's say that's what it is, and I've got this barrier in the way. What am I going to do? Now, let's say obviously the logical thing to do would be to remove the barrier, and we're going to talk about that later, but let's say it's there and I don't feel that I can move it. I'm not authorized to move it. I don't have enough autonomy in my work environment to get this darn thing out of the way. Whatever the case, I am going to figure out some way to get over, under, or around this barrier. And in the course of doing that, I am likely to do a couple of things. Number one, it's going to stress me, and we already know level of mental stress goes up, potential for making mistakes go up. Secondly, there's a decent potential I may be doing something that is less than optimally safe. Not on purpose necessarily, but gosh darn it, this thing is my way. I'm going to get around it. And if I don't get 50 back and forths over the course of my 8 hours, I'm going to get yelled at. So I'm going to figure it out. The thing is, I can just about guarantee you in your organization there are all kinds of unnecessary barriers and obstacles that people are having to put up with in the course of doing their darndest to get their work done. What do you think we want to do with them? Remember, these are unnecessary barriers, not protective defenses. They're unnecessary barriers or obstacles. We want to get rid of the darn things. So we'll talk more about that later. So that's the other thing that sets people up to make mistakes. And then the third one are what we call landmines. Landmines are specific things that set people up to make mistakes. They can be things like drawings that don't accurately reflect as-built conditions. They can be software that leads you down a wrong path because somebody screwed up in the programming, or there's supposed to be a stop point here and it got missed and we head down the wrong road, or you've got a procedure that's got an incorrect step or steps out of order, all kinds of things. And again, I can just about guarantee you, matter of fact, I guarantee you, your organization right now is absolutely chock full of roadblocks and landmines, setting people up to make mistakes. There's no question about it. So what do we want to do with landmines? Well, first of all, why do we call them landmines? In the science of human performance, these are what you might have gone through some training or heard about this before. They're called latent organizational weaknesses. Blah, 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 blah. Now, there's some science behind the term latent organizational weakness. That's fine. But we got to remember, the average person on your team or in your organization could care less about the science of human performance. What we want is we want things that can help us do our jobs better, more reliably, more efficiently, more safely, and not take more time. That's what we want, right? That's what everybody wants. So why get bogged down in abstract terms like latent organizational weakness? People just aren't even going to pay any attention to you. However, a landmine, that's a tangible thing. And most people know what a landmine is. And the thing about landmines is they're typically hidden. You sure as heck don't want to step on one, and if you do, something bad generally happens. So we all know what landmines are, right? So we call them landmines. What do you think we want to do with landmines in our organization? We want to dig those suckers up and get rid of them. Now, before I move on, I'll read through the formal definition here. Landmines are process, programmatic, or organizational factors or conditions that make it more likely for people to make mistakes. And I've already given you a whole bunch of examples. Now, let's go back to traps, conditions of the work environment that make it more likely for us to make mistakes. Think back through that list. How many of those traps would you say are present in your work environment on any given day at work? Depending upon the environment, and we're doing this, with a room full of people, most people say all of them. And I would say, well, first shift, last shift's probably not all the time, but if not all of them, certainly most of them, right? Present. Are roadblocks everywhere? Yep. Are landmines everywhere? Yep. So then I got to ask the question, how do we ever do anything right? And yet, day in and day out, our team members, we come to work, we do a good job, we don't get hurt, we go home safe. Most of the time we meet schedules, most of the time we meet budgets. The point is, we're doing a darn good job. But can we do better? Of course we can. And if things are ever going to get better in your organization, where does it need to begin? It needs to begin with you. Absolutely needs to begin with you. All right, let's continue on. In reality, when we talk about events, now, we haven't covered these definitions yet, but let's just draw a distinction between an error or a mistake and an event. We did talk about this when we did the vision, event-free worldwide, one life at a time. Remember that? So an event is something really bad, something of significant consequence. I think if you're looking at this picture, that might be classified as an event. Okay? So it takes teamwork to create an event. If you've ever been involved in a root cause analysis, they're about as much fun as a root canal. And they virtually always identify an entire sequence of things. Well, if that person hadn't done that, if this team had taken care of that, if we'd addressed that issue, and you do this chronology, and son of a gun, if we'd have done any one of those things, this would not have happened. Almost all the time when we do a root cause analysis, those kind of things come up. So now, if we're talking about taking a proactive approach, does it not make sense that we ought to go ahead and take care of those things? Absolutely. So now you say, well, yeah, but we don't have the manpower or the budget. Really? Let me ask you this question. Who likely has the best idea on and the knowledge of where those traps, roadblocks, and landmines are. And who likely has the best ideas on how to get rid of them? The people doing the work. We don't need a bunch of consultants to come in and tell us this stuff. The people doing the work have the answers.
If you're finding these insights helpful, please share them with your friends and colleagues. Help your search engine find more content like this for you by hitting the like button before you leave. And if these PPI messages resonate with you, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next one. Until next time, my friend, be safe, stay humble, and make a difference.